and today I'll take you through how to run Expurgate solo in Amazon Lightsail. So the first thing we want to do is access the Amazon AWS Lightsail interface. We will be creating an instance, not a container, and the reason is that Amazon Lightsail containers do not support UDP traffic, which is required for DNS. So we're going to click Create Instance. We can select our zone. We might like to create one instance in, say, East Coast US and one East Coast, West Coast US, or somewhere else in the world. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to create two instances in the one zone. I'm going to select OS only and then select Debian 11.4. You can use another distro. Just keep in mind there are nuances with distros like Ubuntu that do listen on DNS UDP 53 by default. I think they use like a local forward proxy. Debian does not do this, so that's why I've chosen Debian. Click Add Launch Script, and we can take the launch script from the page. This is going to pull an install sh file straight down from the GitHub. The install file will install Docker, and the second line will run the Docker container. The second line you will want to customize for your particular instance. I'm just going to run it in demo mode, so source prefix is off, and I'm just running it against publicly accessible name SPF records. We can select $3.50 plan, that's fine for this. And as I said, I'm going to create two instances so I can, and they will be in the same zone. So if you want one in one zone and one in another geographic zone, you'd be best to select one here and then repeat the process in another zone. So this will go ahead and create my two instances. By default, they will have dynamic IP addresses. If you are wishing to deploy this in production, I would strongly recommend using static IP addresses, which can be done under the network settings of each of those instances. So once the instances are running, we can go into each of them and manage separately. We'll start with networking. So if you were wanting to attach a static IP address, this is where you would be able to do that per instance. By default, Lightsail opens TCP/22 for SSH and TCP/80. We don't need TCP/80, so I'm going to delete that. And I will add TCP/9001. I would recommend locking that down to trusted or allowed IP ranges. For the purpose of this demo, I'll leave that unrestricted. And then I'll go ahead and open UDP for DNS, which is port 53. We don't want to lock that one down. That one needs to be serving all the receiving mail servers performing SPF lookups. We can turn off IPv6. rbldnsd in this instance is not listing, or it's not compiled for IPv6. So we can go back to the main screen and just check that our installation completed whilst we opened the ports. So if I run docker ps, what we should find is that the container is running. I'm just going to switch from admin mode to root. So we'll try that again, docker ps. And we can see that the Expurgate solo container is running. Port 53 UDP and TCP 9001 is being passed through to the host. So with that now running and our ports open, I can now take our public IP address and navigate to 9001, which is the supervisor interface. We can see our two services have been running for 1 minute. The resolver is the service that generates the config file, and we can see the config file was written to disk in the rbldnsd folder. This script has then notified PID, which is rbldnsd, that there is a change and to rescan the config file. So when we jump across to Expurgate rbldnsd, we can see that the domain names passed into the Docker run environment variables have been scanned and are now being served by this instance. We can also test that UDP53 is open. So we'll just do an NS lookup against the IP address of this particular instance. I'm passing the IP address of a SendGrid permitted address in reverse, so 167.89.1.1 into this instance. And the response we're getting back for the text record lookup identifies that that IP is permitted in that SPF record. If I was to change that to an IP address that's not permitted by SendGrid, we will receive a soft fail in response. So that concludes the installation and setup of Expurgate Solo in Amazon Lightsail.